Welcome back to another episode of Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life, where we dive into stories of innovation, inspiration, and mentorship. I'm your co-host, Natalie Peyton, alongside Dan Dillard and Dr. Leon Vanstone. Today, we're thrilled to have our special guest, Marc Nathan, a true super connector in the Austin startup scene. Marc has a unique talent for building bridges between people, startups, and opportunities. We're going to explore Marc's journey, his insights on networking, mentorship, and his thoughts on navigating the ever-evolving world of business and technology. Thanks to our Gen Z contributors this episode, including Landon, who asks how to balance higher education with the search for a career, and Sebastian, who describes AI as being an amazing tool for his education. You don't want to miss this one, so let's dive in.
So, welcome to Founding Up Uncharted, your sidekick for life. I've been enjoying this series so much, and all the great guests. So, don't spoil it, Marc. You got a high bar.
Got to keep the streak.
Exactly. Let's do quick intros.
Hey, everybody. I'm Natalie Peyton. I am an actor, comedian, and podcast personality, and I run investor relations at Founding Up.
You say you're an actor as well? Comedian? Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I was.
You were like investor relations.
I was looking at I was like, she's looking here. I need to be looking over there.
I think that's my
your
camera.
close.
Right?
Yeah, you got to get into that one.
Exactly. So,
where do you want my outline?
Yeah, right there.
For when you give
or
your
whatever.
intro.
Yeah. Leon.
I didn't even realize we were supposed to be looking at the camera.
Well, you don't have to.
I do.
She does.
So that I can
he's a professional.
She's a professional.
I am
That's where the actor.
I am a simple rocket man with my simple rocket ways.
Who cares how they look at me? My nose is in the computer.
Ah, dear. All right. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Leon Vanstone, rocket scientist, storyteller, entrepreneur, co-host of Uncharted, co-founder of Founding Up, among a great many other things. Yes. It's been a morning.
A little bit busy.
It's been a morning.
Above all, this morning, caretaker. To Sterling.
No, father
to Sterling.
I'm not a caretaker.
Potty trainer.
Yeah.
And I'm Dan Dillard, also host of Founding Up Uncharted and co-founder of Founding Up, as well as other entities, media and wealth management. So excited today to bring a good friend in, Marc Nathan, who super connector in town, but I'll let you talk about you at the moment, and we'll go into the we'll go into history in a second, but just like what you do now.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it, and thank you for having me. My name is Marc Nathan. I'm not a multi-hyphenate like my friends here. I have one hyphen, and it's super connector. Like we mentioned, my job specifically is business development for a law firm called Michael Best. That's sort of my cover story to allow me to do what I love doing, which is connecting individual people, startups, and money.
That's so cool.
Pretty succinct. Yeah,
he has said that before.
I love that. You figured yourself out.
I have.
That's what we're trying to help people do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, as you know, Marc, the format of our show is, our guest mentor comes in and we learn all about you, your history, what you thought you were going to do in high school versus what you're doing today, and then mentorship and how that's impacted you along the way and what it means to you today. So why don't we start with my favorite question is, when you were in high school, let's go back. What did you think you were going to do?
I really want him to say from the age of 7, I was going to be a super connector.
Right. I wish that were the case.
I can imagine him in a little bow tie at 7 and be like,
and for everyone listening, I had no idea what a super connector was until about 3 years ago. And yeah, apparently you still don't know. So
right. We're all making it up as we go.
Everybody wants to know, by the way. I'm asking for a friend.
We're going to dig into it. But you asked a question, I'm going to answer it. Okay. So from about 5, so you asked at high school, I'm going to go a little bit further than that. I always wanted to be an architect when I was little. Architects were super cool. They made buildings. Buildings were cool. I was young, and throughout middle school, high school, I realized I needed to be able to draw a straight line, which I could not do. So architect was out. I also
found before they invented the ruler, or
it was sort of in the midst. I feel very old, so maybe at the same time. But ultimately, I realized it wasn't the life for me. Plus, the schooling was impossible. It's brutal training process. And I realized at the end of the day, do I really want to make buildings? And probably not. So about high school, which is what you asked. Go ahead.
Pause for a second, because I just want to interject. I had the same want at about that age to be an architect. Huh. And the one thing that steered me away because I loved the buildings, I love art, everything else. But two things you mentioned. One, remember you had to do everything by handwriting, so you had to like
Slide rule.
print. You had to print everything like super perfect. Oh my God,
It's funny though. One thing that always noodles in the back of my mind when I think about when people say what they want to be, right, is like, what is it really about that thing that draws you to it? Because what I think is so funny about that is both of you wanted to be architects, but both of you ended up being builders.
Oh, that's interesting.
Just not of building.
Mm-hmm.
You both ended up making things, putting things together, creators, right? But like, so like, is there some part in your brain that's like, I want to build things, and those people build
that
things,
was the outlet,
and that's the outlet. But it's like, that's what's so weird about careers, and that's so weird about life paths, right? You can be a teacher in a lot of different ways, right? Or an architect in a lot of different ways. That's cool. Putting things together, right? Introducing people.
I never thought about that way.
But I find that fascinating. Anyway, I don't want to derail the story.
No, not at all.
The second thing that derailed me was I did what we advise everybody to go talk to somebody in the field. So I'm going to go talk to somebody. I remember I was in Midland, Texas, and I was like, I'm going to go to school. I'd already gone to a few schools to figure this out, and I went into the wrong office. It was about the time when AutoCAD had come out and all that kind of stuff. And these guys were just so depressed. They're like, don't be an architect.
Oh, what weird dude. The career will be
career's gone. All these kids on these computers. They're doing these plans for like $50 and they're putting us out of business. And I'm looking at this college bill. And I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't do that. There's no future in it. But anyway, that's kind of what got my sidetracked. But I just saw that point of like connection.
No, that's true.
So go ahead. You're in high school. That's
I morphed from architect, which I thought was an unassailable dream, and it was nice, but not for me. Then I started really watching movies and really enjoying movies, like critically, and thought, you know what? I can never be on the camera with this face. You certainly can. I can't. I thought about maybe producing, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Totally.
The TV world was exploding with 500 cable channels at a time, so I think there'll be all this content available, and that's what I want to do. But then I realized producer was a tough job. What I really wanted to do was be an agent.
Okay.
What do agents do? They connect people.
Yeah.
They build things. They build properties.
Yeah.
I came to realize that being an agent, you have to be real mean, and I didn't have that mean streak in me. And I didn't want to hone that mean streak, so I decided to stay out of LA and stay in Texas, and ended up working for my father while I was still in college. And he was a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, even though I work for lawyers. But
that's how people get to like him. Is I'm not a lawyer.
I say it all the time.
I'm an honest man. No.
Exactly. And ultimately, he needed help with his clients raising money, and I kind of fell backwards into it and been doing it for the last quarter century or so.
Wow.
Very cool.
Slipped and fell into a
slipped backwards into fundraising and startup support.
So not a direct line.
Well, but also, right, it's really interesting because if without that context in that story, right, if we just started with the beginning, you're like, I found my superpower, boom, right? Like that's your LinkedIn post. You're a LinkedIn lunatic now, right? But actually the story of how you arrived at this, like, no, I figured it out. I'm really happy. My career really drives with what I do, right? That passion and that purpose. That alignment was like, I had no idea what I was doing. I kind of fell into something because I was sort of good at it, and then like kept doing more of it, more of the things that I was good at. And with enough persistence, that passion probably got clearer and clearer and clearer.
It certainly did.
I heard layers, kind of like when you say, yes is an onion, because it's like people will say yes to investment, whatever, but then you're like chasing them for half a year because they've said this and they're like, oh, I meant this. And it's just, but when I hear, and I don't know why I told that story, but it's just thinking about the onion. But I hear you didn't necessarily know what you wanted from the get-go, but you peeled away at the layer. You peeled away what didn't work. Like architect's not going to work because X, Y, and Z. The lawyer's not going to work because of this and that. Agent's not going to work because I can't do this. And it just left you with this core of like what it is that drives you.
Well, I came to realize what I enjoyed. And the enjoyment, the people, but a very specific part of the people. And I'll tell you what it is, Natalie. And this is what really drove me. And I learned this. I was very fortunate. I learned this very early on. I enjoyed watching people's eyes light up when I gave them an introduction, or I made a connection for them, or I told them about something they didn't know about. Not in a you should know about this kind of way, but have you heard about X?
Right.
And that spark, that brightness in their eyes, that, oh my God, I get it. That's what I was striving for.
Yeah.
So I've been chasing that dream ever since.
I can see that because it's almost like an altruism.
That's what it is,
right? It's like I'm doing you a favor if you explore this thing.
We call that enlightened self-interest.
Got it.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
And we talked about that a lot.
have you watched Suits?
Of course.
Okay. So all I can think about right now is how I didn't realize that law firms could be so involved in helping businesses until that show. So would you consider yourself sort of, not that you're a lawyer, but like a Harvey Specter, someone who's advising?
I'm not good looking enough to be Harvey Specter.
Oh, please.
But so
It's okay that you do appreciate most people consume podcasts through audio. You can you just lie.
I look much better than Harvey Specter. So you're right.
Exactly.
Just don't turn on the video, but yes.
Guys, don't Google me, but yes. So I can't tell you how lawyers watch a legal show. I can't tell you how doctors watch ER or a medical show. I can't tell you how cops watch a cop show. I can tell you how I watch Shark Tank as somebody who's done angel investment. Right. It drives me insane.
Okay.
So the attitude and the idea of a business person who happens to be a lawyer is very true. I mean, the firm I work for now is really focused on being business people who are lawyers instead of lawyers who do business. And there's a huge difference. Most people go to law school to become lawyers. Right. Some people go to law school to learn how to do business properly. And a lot of the people I work with, and I tend to work with over time, tend to be in that startup building phase. So once again, getting back to what you're saying, Leon, builders, I hang out with builders, and the lawyers I hang out with are builders as well.
Cool. That's great.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it certainly does. It's just cool to see it in real life. You're basically from Suits.
So you're basically like, let me wrap it up into 2 words. You're from Suits.
Yeah.
I'm from Suits, but I actually did graduate college, so I don't have to hide that from anybody.
Right.
That's good. I'm not marrying any duchesses anytime soon, so that's off the table as well. But yeah, Suits is a pretty good app. No, it's not. But I do see the line of questioning. I see the line of thought. Good lawyers, proper lawyers, appropriate lawyers, their job is to protect you from risk, but great lawyers understand the risk and protect you from making mistakes. And that's kind of what we look for.
I like that. That's so true, because I've had experience with lawyers that are just so protected that you can't do anything. And
that's
it's
what they think.
And they get that reputation. And then you have founders who are like, do I really want to take this one pager to a lawyer? Because I know what they're going to say. It's going to be a 5-page reference and that. It just kind of like there's this mental image.
Well, here's the worst part. You're paying somebody to say no to you.
Right.
That's a double hit.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want to pay an exorbitant fee for you to say I can't do that. Yeah. I pay you a lot of money to say how I can do it.
I can do that a lot less on a dating app.
Right. Right. I get rejected for free. I have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So a great lawyer will help you solve the problem, not tell you what the problem is.
Right. Yeah.
Whenever a lawyer says to me, you can't do that, it's too risky, I say, okay, all right, well, I've got actually a better option, I think. And they're like, what's that? I'm going to close the company down. I'm going to bankrupt it. And then you're not getting paid. That's the safest way to make sure no one sues me.
Right.
And they're like, wow, you can't do that. And I'm like, right, well, that's how you sound.
That's
right. Like, I can't do this thing that's actually integral to my business because it's too risky.
Right.
Like, get out of here.
And
get out of here.
Right. And risk, honestly, in this day and age, in the United States in 2024 is when we're recording this, risk is a function of money. So it gets a lot less risky if you have enough money to pay for problems that the government saves. Yeah. So that's what we're seeing in the tech world right now. We're seeing a backlash of that. The pendulum always swings to the extreme. So right now in this current administration, we're seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions that are being completely killed off because of that fear, that specter of too much monopoly power. But at the end of the day, some of those companies are just going to pay a fine and keep going. And they've done it for a long, long time, and it works.
Makes sense. So I hear a few things from your experience. One, the love of seeing people's eyes light up when you make a connection, because you're really could be changing people's lives, right? If they meet the right person, have the right introduction, it's this fork in the road that could, be very impactful for them. But then two, the other thing, and I'm just going to kind of put words in your mouth, but being a well-connected individual through the magazine and everything else, one of the things I loved is learning from everybody. Like, ooh, that's cool. I remember one of the first interviews that I did for the magazine. I walked into this robotics coffee company, and this little robot was making coffee. And this was back in 2016.
Was it here in Austin? So it was Brigo.
Yeah, I believe so.
Had to been.
Yeah, there you
go.
The
only robotic company in town.
There you go. So it was 2016, right?
Yeah, and they to do that.
They were just about to go do one at the airport. And so I get the behind. So I'm like, it feels like Wizard of Oz. You get behind the scenes. You get to see how it all operates, and they tell you how it works and everything else. And I just fell in love with media at that point in time. I was like, ooh, I get to see parts. Like I actually worked in my financial planning firm, like literally less than a mile from this company, but you would have never known where it was.
Sure.
And through this opportunity of making these interviews, just hearing these stories and just seeing the innovation that these people have, I just was like impressed. And I thought, I'm going to do this. This is awesome. So that led to the magazine and podcast and all the things. And so I imagine, just because we were in the same circles, that's probably another wow part of your life.
I got to tell you, highlight of my week is a factory tour. I've actually done the factory tour you're talking about. I've done the Brigo tour. I've seen it. I've seen the Wizard of Oz thing. It's awesome, or was at the time. Yeah. There is nothing more fun than going to a factory tour of a company you've never heard of, never known about, and just see how they operate, see how they do things, see how they think about just things that we're in the tech world, we're in the software world, we're dealing with pixels and things on computers. Mm-hmm. But anytime you're dealing with physical objects, how to move them, how to manage them, how to deal with them, how to sell them, it's fun to watch them make them. I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm. I will caution our listeners, the one caveat to that is don't go see how your food gets made.
That's true.
You won't like that answer.
You'll stop eating.
You won't.
Especially meat products.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Everything else is okay. Actually did a factory tour recently of an Austin company. It's great. They're just outside of Taylor. Afia Foods, you can look them up. They're frozen Middle Eastern food, great people. Just opened up a giant facility to make falafel balls, which they didn't have natively here in Austin, surprise. But great factory tour.
Yeah,
because it's all clean and new and fresh and nothing gross.
Or like chickpeas.
Right. Nothing gross, nothing that has a beating heart you have to worry about.
Awesome. All right, well, let's shift gears into mentorship. What points of your career did mentorship impact you?
All of them, every one of them. Okay. Mentoring is why I'm sitting here in front of you today. Yeah. Mentoring is something I really believe in very strongly. I have some very specific, very concrete opinions about mentoring, which might not be right, but I certainly hold them. Yeah. I believe, and let's just level set for a second if we don't mind. Yeah. In the modern world and the software world, we know about incubators and accelerators like Y Combinator and Techstars and here locally Capital Factory and a few others. So all of the people that help those companies are labeled with a broad brush mentors. I believe that that's incorrect, grammatically and practically, because in my mind, a mentor is somebody who helps person with their career, whereas advisor helps company with their growth. We've conflated the two. And we now interchange mentor and advisor the same way we exchange advisor with consultant. Well, advisor helps a company grow. A consultant gets paid for a deliverable. Once again, these are definitions that at this point, who cares? Nobody really matters.
Yeah, but it
doesn't matter. But it's something I think about. So I believe very strongly in mentorship. And mentorship is where you find somebody, you have some sort of affiliation with them, whether that's your son-in-law, your goddaughter, or whatever it might be. You know them, you want to see them succeed, and you help them throughout their career, not just through their company. Okay. So I believe very strongly in mentor because I've had a lot of really great mentors over the years, and I wouldn't be here without them. Right. So in my mind, being a good mentor, and being a good mentor is actually different than being a mentor. Right. Actually caring, that's the number one goal. Really having the time and the effort and really the desire to help somebody, that's really critical to me. But ultimately, you have to desire it from both sides and it has to be a match. It's like dating. Right. It's what it is. Really and
or at least the person needs to be listening.
Precisely. And I found the number one trait of a great mentor is learning how to listen, which is opposite of what you think. Right. You think
like
they're talking
active listening kind of stuff.
Right. It's understanding what the problem is and not jumping ahead. Right. When you're a hammer, the whole world's a nail. When you're a mentor, the whole world is whatever you did in your last 5 years of business, that was the right thing to do because you're successful and you're a mentor. But that's not really the case. It took me a long time to learn that. To be a 25-year-old mentor sounds ridiculous. It's like a 25-year-old life coach. They happen, but come on. I found that over time and over many years of having many mentor style and advisor style meetings, I talk less. I don't talk a little. I'm still a talker.
I was going to say, I know. I question that.
I talk less. I use fewer words.
Imagine?
But
he was at 25?
Yeah. But I really try to listen actively and understand what the problem is because let's face it, 90% of this is not tactical. What's the problem here? How do I fit slot A into tab B? That's not it. It's mostly psychology. It's mostly how people perceive the world and how people perceive the other people and how they feel about themselves and what their value is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's skewed. Sometimes you get a lot of, and especially here in a town like Austin, you get a lot of 20-year-old kids in hoodies with an idea for a new NFT or a new AI startup or a new crypto thing. That's all well and good, but they lack depth of experience. So in my mind, a mentor's role is to help show them the roadmap, to show them that they haven't started from day one in a vacuum. There's a whole history of business over the last 2,000 or 3,000 years or so that kind of layer up to where they are today.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to teach younger people the history of where they're at because they just don't know. They have no context. Right. Older people have been through the careers and now are into a startup or doing something new. You have to teach them what the modern business world looks like. 10 years ago, every one of us would have been on Twitter. Today, it's an afterthought. Mm-hmm. So because of that, it actually lends to real world problems. Well, let's face it. If we want to blast out, let's say a podcast or an event or a newsletter, we only had 4 or 5 channels a few years ago. Before that, we only had, if you want to blast it out, radio, television, billboards. Okay. Now with the internet, 25 years later of the internet, we have all kinds of different ways to promote an event or something. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, every other social network I'm not on because I'm not cool enough. These things cycle in and cycle out, but they cycle at a much faster pace.
Right.
And so our job is to help those people who are just getting into the business from whatever angle they're coming from to get them up to speed on what's working today.
I find that 100% resonates. Having a background in finance, in my whole 25-year career was listening, because you have to listen to, every case is different. You got to listen to the whole thing. And so active listening was a big part of it. And so when I moved into media and people were approaching me about ideas and what you do there, it was a natural part to listen. However, sometimes because I'm running late for a meeting or whatever, it's like, let me just tell you when you feel like jumping in, and I always got it wrong. Whenever I jumped in too quick, and I didn't listen all the way, there was a rest of the story that just would have changed the entire advice. It's like, because you kind of pinhole the situation as you're probably aware. You're like, I know exactly what you're going to say because I've heard this like 15 times. So let me just get to the bottom and tell you what to do, and we move forward. You try to compress that time. And almost in every one of those cases that I didn't do it, it's like, but there's this detail. I'm like, oh, that was the wrong advice. Let me go back. So active listening is...
I've been very guilty of that many times.
Yeah.
And what it really boils down to is pattern recognition. If you see a pattern 10 times, you expect the 11th time to be about the same. If you've seen something 100 times, you expect the next 100 to look about the same. But over time, that changes. So from a mentoring perspective, you're just looking at it from the lens of mentoring. Mentoring really is about pattern recognition.
Right.
It's hearing a story and saying, oh, I remember when I did that, or when I heard about this and that. And it's basically storytelling, but in a modern age and getting up to speed. So I totally agree, but listening really is the important part.
The other thing that you say super connector, and I've never labeled myself as that. However, I know I've got a big network just because of the things that I've been involved with.
Don't give him any more terms.
The other part of it is naturally, just doing this from a long time ago, not in finance or everything else, is always connecting dots in your head. That's just kind of this thing that has always happened for me. And I just thought it's natural. So I guess it's natural for some of us. I'm not sure if it's for everyone, but
it certainly is for me.
Yeah.
That's the way I operate.
So it's like bing, 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 and then all of a sudden you connect the dots for someone. So the big part of mentorship, and this is what I want to impress upon the audience, because a lot of Gen Z are like, we go out and ask Gen Z, it's like, do you have a mentor? Most of them say no.
Most of them don't even know what a mentor is.
Right.
Or exactly. Their answer isn't how we are all looking at mentorship.
And so what I want to impress is not only the advice on career, but it's also connection. It's not who you know, it's what you know. I mean, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Right.
I'm going to reverse that.
Right.
I think that's most people's advice. I think most people would agree with that. It's not what you know, it's who you know. I think we all say that's probably pretty true for most people's career. I'm going to take it one step further, and that includes a lot of media people in front of cameras, people that are doing this sort of leadership track. It's who knows you.
Right.
And
great point.
Reputation really does matter.
Yeah, right.
And building your reputation takes years. It comes crashing down in one sentence. We all know that. But it's really about how you position yourself in the market as well. That's true. Because what you're doing by positioning yourself is you're selecting a lane or picking a tribe or whatever you want to call it. But you've recognized who your people are, and you're putting out in the world through your reputation who should be attracted to that kind of person.
Right.
So that's the opposite of active listening. That's actually doing and making things happen.
And thanks for saying that, because so many people show up and they just expect you to introduce them to your network.
Right.
And you and I both know that it's your brand. You're protecting your name, your brand to your network in order to have a good reputation. So that whenever I do call Mark up, he takes my call because he knows I'm only showing up with things that are valuable on both sides.
I feel the same way.
Versus, oh, point me here, point me there. I'm like, when you're ready, I will at that point. And so,
or when I'm comfortable. Or when I have time, because what you really talked about, and I think about this probably more than most people, but I think about this a lot. What you're really talking about, we talk about things in broad terms like reputation, but in practical and tactical terms, that's really political capital.
Yep.
That's relationships that you've built, and that's an asset that you've created and you've fostered, and then you can spend it any way you want.
Right.
Most people don't think about that way because they shouldn't. Why would they? But relationships are give and take, and they're about who can help who and affiliation and why you're doing something for somebody else. And I'm not saying keeping score is the right thing. It's certainly not.
No.
But if you have what we would call high political capital, you've built a reputation, you know people know you, you're considered an expert in certain things. Well, you're asked to do more. And sometimes you're filling somebody else's cup, which is great. That's, a lot of mentoring is like that. Sometimes, and this is what you're really talking about, sometimes they overstep and they don't recognize how valuable your connections are and how big your network is. So when they say, hey, can you introduce me? And I get this call probably 3 or 4 times a day. I'm not kidding. I'm really not kidding. That usually does happen a day.
I can imagine.
But that's not the issue. I love helping people I like.
Right.
I hate helping people I don't like. So I just want to be likable.
Yeah.
Because I want to reverse it as well. I want people to like me enough to want to help me for the same reason you do it. I want them to pick up my call or take that email.
Well, and there's something important about this that you and I have talked about, Natalie, is this, for me at least, it's the word integrity. It's like both your own brand and always doing what you say you're going to do and just following through and making sure that brand's out there. But anybody that I make an introduction to, I'm vouching that this person has integrity.
Right.
You're spending your political capital on that introduction.
Right.
And I was just talking about this yesterday with a friend of mine online. Making those introductions, there's an art to it. It can be done very, very poorly. It can also be done very well. Yeah. But part of the...
Let's have a crash course.
Okay, part and parcel about being a connector is you got to learn how to make a double opt-in introduction.
It has to be mutually beneficial.
Not just that, but here's the practical. A double opt-in introduction is where you want to meet him, he wants to meet you. I know you both, but I ask both of you first before I make the introduction.
Yes. Oh, that's
so if I introduce you, Natalie, to you, Leon, without you knowing about it, then 2 things happen. A, you're obligated as a favor to me to take the call. And B, you have to do it and you have to show up properly because otherwise you lose face and I lose face. So the obligation is twofold.
That's also a much higher cost on you as well if you haven't pre-called with me.
It's horrible.
First.
And I'll tell you what happened to me, and this is how I really learned this lesson. I used to make random introductions all the time. Oh, you like the color blue, you like the color green, you guys should talk. No problem. Or in business settings, like if anybody did sort of what I would call sort of early beginning level networking. Oh, you're a hairdresser? Great. You're a mortgage broker. You guys should exchange cards. So what? It doesn't matter. Sure. I've come to realize that my job is to make meaningful connections. In order to make them meaningful, both sides have to profit or benefit in some way, or at least in some obvious way.
Sure.
That obvious way could just be 2 cool people are meeting each other and they should be friends. I do that all the time. I'm happy to make those connections. But if there's no context to it and there's no warning, they could become a landmine. And so I stay very clear from that. I was just talking about this online. I wrote an article about this on Medium a few years ago with a friend of mine, Chris Palmisano, who's a great sales guy.
I know Chris.
Everybody knows Chris. He's great. He's a super connector. We were not arguing. We were discussing.
I don't know Chris.
You'll
I
meet
don't
him.
either.
He's great.
Can I get an intro?
He's great. That would be my pleasure. We were talking about how nobody knows how to do a double opt-in introduction anymore. So we wrote a blog post about it and it resonated because it's not that people want to do it or don't want it. They just don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the one horrible thing about, and I say this as a man of a certain age, these young kids today, they just don't know business. And because nobody ever taught them, because nobody really had internships or mentors, especially during COVID. How do you do that?
Instinctually, though, like having decorum or self-respect or respect for your peers and your network, I couldn't live with myself if I just immediately connected people over email without checking with them first.
Right.
And that's because I do value who I'm connected with.
I will say, though, if you think of the social media world that a lot of Gen Z lives in, right, the concept of a follow, or you can almost subscribe to anyone you want at the click of a button, right? It is a much more fast transaction environment, right?
Well, Leon, let me ask you this. If I say this today, if I say I stalked you online, is that a problem for you? No, you expect it.
Right.
If somebody says they stalk you online, you might
we
get a little nervous.
We don't call it stalking, we call it sleuthing, and that way it's not creepy.
Fair. No,
LinkedIn sleuthing.
Okay, no, but that, you're right. You're 100% right. It is a natural thing.
Well, but the bit I was going to add that
please.
changes everything, that causes a completely different conclusion.
You mean to say that I shouldn't have spoke ahead and listened to you first? Excuse me.
Is that the difference, though, with online is there isn't a real connection.
Right.
Right. And mentorship, you really said it, right? It's about caring about that other person, right?
Precisely.
And I need a reason to care about you. I mean, like, sure, I care about everyone. I want everyone to do well. But like specifically, I only have so many minutes in a day, right? If I'm giving them to people. So I think there's this tendency when you're younger to just make really hard and fast introductions, because that's just what, especially when you're younger and you don't have careers and you don't have such a reputation, hopefully.
You have nothing to lose.
But right, it doesn't matter, right?
Quantity over quality.
Right. And then as you do more of that, you start to realize what the value is. And again, social media, I think, exacerbates that. But the need for real human connection, especially in Gen Z to some extent, is very large, and that is the real difference there, I think.
As a matter of fact, you bring that up, it reminds me of some of the Gen Z interviews we were doing a few weeks ago, where some of the things that resonated with me was they were talking about how do you build community, because that's one thing that they feel, at least the individuals we were talking to, were like, this has got to change. I mean, this has got to change. There is no community anymore.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Right. Yeah. The music guys. They're like, I know I love the feeling of being around people who are enjoying themselves. They specifically attributed it to like going to live music, and they were musicians and music makers, but they didn't know how to be a part of it in a significant and like long lasting way.
Yeah. So exactly what you're saying is the digital life that we've got. It's even the LinkedIn. There's not a connection there by just following someone or linking it. I'll accept some just because it's annoying me. I'll accept or deal. I've got so many that are waiting. I'm like, whatever.
I'll take it. Yeah.
And then when they try to sell me something, then I decline it or something. Right? It's just like one of these things that I go back. I'm like, I gotta clean this up to really see what my real number is as far as. But then it just never happens. But what we're talking about is people first name basis, the backgrounds. I was having breakfast with someone, one of our other podcast guests that we had recently, and this morning, and he at the very end is like, my wife just became a CPA. Do you know anybody that's like, she's in this state, if ex-paralegal, now doing this? Do you know anyone? I'm like, yeah, I know like 5 people. But because I just talked to like these 5 people like 3 weeks ago. And so it's this double connection. So the first thing I did is what you said, is like, I'd be happy to make the introduction, send me the stuff. And the first thing I did is texted the people I know is that, are you looking for this? Would this be interesting? Want this introduction? And if they say yes, boom, there it goes. And hopefully, that makes sense. But yeah, right. The real network, which is not digital. So,
and I'm very proud of this. It's just happened on the drive over here today. This happened about an hour ago. And it's exactly what you just said. I got a call from a friend of mine, and he's become a friend of mine because he and his wife and family moved to Austin about 1.5 years ago. He came to one of my events. We shook hands. We got along very well. He's a great guy. He's in the consumer packaged goods world. He's building a product with his wife. The product itself is absolutely excellent. It's a breakout hit. It's no doubt that it's going to be doing very well. But we've stayed friends. So he's come to my events. I've seen him. I had an investor who was coming into town who wanted to meet some CPG companies just casually and easily and no problem. So I said, well, come to my event. I made sure that the guy who has the brand was there. I made sure to connect them. This was about a week and a half ago. I got a call about an hour ago. He said that the investor's already talking to the company and they're having their second call to talk about a term sheet later this week.
Nice.
So that proves, now I can't put a dollar figure on that because it's not for me, but that proves that event marketing, and actually not even event marketing, not even business development, but presence matters. Just building a presence and building the right tribe around the right people.
Yep. Going out there
And
doing it.
for those
So
listening,
exciting.
a term sheet means that they're actually going to cut a check.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
So
That's the
what
real
it
deal.
shows is that they're serious enough to put pen to paper about
Right.
a deal. And that's important.
Very cool.
Mhm.
Very cool. All right. We talked mentorship. What would we say to Gen Z today that are going to school, trying to figure it out? Who should they look for in their first mentors? Because we've been talking about business and connections and this and that. But thoughts on you've got kids.
I do.
How old?
So my oldest is 19, just started at University of Texas 2 weeks ago.
Whoa.
Thank you. Actually a very proud entrepreneur moment. I can't wait to say this out loud. I'm very excited. There's an organization at University of Texas called the KSWELI, KSWELI, Kendra Scott Women Entrepreneur Leadership Institute.
Right.
I've heard of them.
It's wonderful. It's a great organization.
I'm
And
sure.
the original managing director is a very dear friend, Leslie Robinson, who's absolutely wonderful. And she left recently, but when I got I'm on the email list and I opened it up and it said, general membership application for UT students, sign up now. And of course I texted it to my daughter and surprise, she actually texted me back the registration copy. She got it. So I immediately sent the text back to Leslie and said, I know you're not here anymore, but you set this legacy. Nice. And for me to say to my daughter, you should be doing this, like that, all the people I've talked to in my entire life are great, but they're not my daughter.
Right.
But for her to be able to actually listen to me, and what comes of it, I don't know.
Right.
But the fact that she at least believed I was not just dad, but a guy who really could help her and show her that, that felt really good. So to answer your question, didn't answer your question. What does answer your question is fish where the fish are. Gen Z people, if they are at all interested in being mentored, they should go to where mentors are, which means organizations and events that host business professional events, business development events, happy hours. Obviously, if they're kids, they can't get in, but I do a lot of morning coffee meetups where they certainly can get in. So fish where the fish are, number one. Ask friends and family who's the most successful person they know that they can make an introduction to. That's usually a very good way to do it. Because they're young kids, they have teachers. Teachers, principals, coaches, anybody like that usually knows somebody. And it might not be within the context of the business. It could be just my next door neighbor is CEO of X. But you start with what you know. And if you don't know, there's lots and lots of online platforms out there that are doing their best to match mentors with individuals.
Who do you know who?
Right.
Is the best question to ask.
And once again, and I've been really playing with this recently, you could ask that question on Facebook 5, 6, 10 years ago, and you get real answers.
Yeah, you would. I was alive then.
You can post that same question on Reddit and maybe get an answer a week later, but there's no central source for asking these things online. Used to be Quora.
Well, it's like asking the internet for a wife or a husband, right?
You can.
Like you'll get an answer. Someone will recommend something, but the nature.
I have a million different things going through my head. They all end in OnlyFans. So keep going.
Oof, spicy. But yeah, I mean, it's that and again, it comes back to that double-sided introduction, because what I'm coming up to you and say, hey, who do you know who, right? Who do you know who does this? And then you think, and you know me because we're friends. And then you go, okay, I know what Leon does. I was working on, so okay, who do I overrate that? But then you go to them and be like, hey, I've got this guy who's doing this, and now that's a good introduction. That's a blind date, basically, right?
Yes,
with less blindness.
The hope is that there's less blindness.
Because you can't know perfectly.
You never know, but you can, but once again, it's pattern recognition.
Right. Hey, you two would get on well. You should talk to each other.
Yeah.
And here's why.
Or the needs, you're identifying the needs, right? So it's like, I know this company needs, in this case this morning, I knew these companies were young and I'd already conversations about them trying to grow and having trouble finding somebody. And you hear this other one, oh, that's a natural puzzle fit. So let's do that. So hopefully it works out. But there is that, pattern recognition and matchmaking thing. So love the advice. I think that's on point as far as go where the fish are. I don't think we've heard that before on the podcast.
I don't think we have either.
All right, cool. Let's jump into some questions.
Great.
All right, let's go.
Let's get serious.
Now it's getting serious.
The socks are getting pulled up, ladies and
Yeah,
gentlemen.
we're doing it right.
Oh, we got Landon over at ACC. Let's see what he's got to say.
So how do you like balance like you wanting to, I guess, be more career driven and focus on your future career? But also, how do you live in like your day-to-day life knowing you're going to have to pick that out soon?
So I'm going to reinterpret the question because I understood it as more like, how do you focus on your career and have a work-life balance? Is that kind of what he's
That's
saying?
what I'm thinking, yeah.
That's
how I figured.
yeah.
Okay, I could be
Oh,
misinterpreting.
he's in school. So
Yeah, I understand.
how I interpret it,
Yeah,
how
tell
do you
me.
school and live life with all the things school offers in that age range, and then also be focused and intentional about what your career is going to be after school.
Well, the obvious answer to thank you very
Sure.
much, Natalie. The answer to that question is obvious. You don't. You don't balance it. There's no such thing as balance. We all know that. When you're in school, you go 100 miles an hour in 10 different directions. That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
So for a young guy like this, Landon, live your life, enjoy. But if you're out of school and you actually have to have some direction, there's some responsibility, you got to pay bills. You know, I believe that in your 20s and 30s, you really are you're trying to figure out your own life and figure out how the world works. I don't believe that you have to stay at a company for 10 years to make it serious. I think that most young people should be switching jobs every couple of years, but only if it's enhancing them and their careers, not just hopping jobs from one barista job to a burger flipper job. Not that we don't need those jobs, they're important, but they're not career enhancement jobs. So I think the career enhancement job should be the first thing you think about of what you can learn and pick up over time. And I'm biased because I had a very eclectic background growing up, and that's why I'm in the position I'm in now. But if I was going to answer his question, I'd say focus on what interests you, figure out what you don't like. That's actually very important.
Yeah, and that's easier as well,
It is.
honestly. It's much easier to figure out if you don't like something.
That's right. And so if he can use the next few years while he's in school at internships and right after school, his first few jobs, he should be able to have a very clear path of where he needs to go.
I love that.
I do too. It's so succinct, so clear.
That's why we got him.
That's why we got
We'll
Marc
see.
Nathan
All right,
on the show.
that's one down.
One for three.
I will say one of the things to take a slightly different interpretation of that question because, you know, YOLO. One of the things I would see a lot, right, with the Gen Z when I was teaching them, and education is so full, right? Because there's this tendency, let's say it's fairly relaxed and you just do your whatever it is, 6 hours a day, right? And then, okay, now there's one kid gets some homework, right? Or the one kid's doing some like at-home learning. And then everyone else says, well, hang on, they're now ahead. Their CV looks better. So we're all going to do this too. And so the curriculum kind of just naturally bloats to be really, really full, right? But the problem with that is when everything is structured or semi-structured, when do you live your life? When do you, like, hey, I have to be here and I have to be good at this and I have to pass the exam. And then I have to go get an extracurricular. It doesn't matter which one. Apparently lacrosse is great if you want to be a tech bro. So now I have to do lacrosse. I'm not doing it because I enjoy it. I'm doing it because I need the network. So like you don't actually live your life sometimes. You don't get to see what you like or don't. You had to do everything. Do you know what happens when you force me to do things I enjoy? I don't like them. The whole point, that's what they say, don't turn your hobby into a hustle.
Never.
You'll learn to hate your hobbies, right? As soon as my hobbies have deadlines, that's just work. That's how that works, right? And so, I don't know, a bit of what I did here there is it's really hard to find a career when your entire schedule is full of things you have to do. And that is tough. And that's kind of why then you're not at school anymore. And like you hinted at, your 20s and 30s, now you're like, oh, I don't have anyone to tell me where to be or where to go or what to do or what exam to take or what book to read or anything else. Oh, what do I do? And that's often what you see now where a bunch of people really find themselves because they're like, oh, I went here and then I started doing this and you start realizing what you do and don't like. And I don't know, there is a bit of that.
I agree with that.
I don't have good answers, sadly, but
That's it. You're off the show. We need some.
I specifically experienced something this week as a fractional worker, as somebody who has multiple jobs, all the hyphens.
Sure.
And I'm pursuing what I love, which is acting. And I'm in a show right now. So I had all 3 of my jobs happening in one day. I got deadlines and launch dates all happening in September. And then so I ended my last meeting at 6:50, and my rehearsal for this show that I'm in started at 7, from 7 to 10. And I got home and I saw there was my friends' cars and outside of my house hanging with my sister. And I was like, oh God, now there's people at my house. Anyway, I had a meltdown and I was like, why am I so weak? What is wrong with me? Why can't I manage this? And everybody that I talked to afterwards, and they say sleep on it because your brain literally cleans itself overnight. I slept on it and I was like, oh, actually, wow, I'm managing a lot. And anybody, like when you said you don't, it was exactly the lesson that I got from it. You can't balance that. That's not a balance. That's not sustainable. But I'm also doing everything that I love right now. And I feel like I'm in a masterclass every time we're working together, Dan or Leon. So I feel like I'm in such a place of transition, but also abundance and future possibilities that I'm okay with being in this stage right now.
It's sometimes important to sprint.
Yeah.
You don't have to always marathon.
And actually, I love a piece of that where you said you're in a place of transition. School is a place of transition. Like,
Sure.
And you don't have to just be at school. What you're doing is a place of transition, but transition is in its nature not sustainable, right? You transition to something and then reach a new equilibrium and then kind of figure things out. Yeah. And that's why there's no balance in those places, right? Because that's not how it's not supposed to be sustainable.
And what did we learn the other day? In that it was like a little master class.
Thing from the fire marshal.
Yeah, no, from
because I swear I didn't put that there.
Adler, who was saying companies should want to be in the sustainability phase, not in the transition phases, like scalability. Everybody wants to be scalable,
Nick.
Yeah. I just
said Adler. I was like,
Nick Alter.
Oh, Alter? Oh, I'm dyslexic. Okay, Alter.
But yeah, there's only Nick. Two sustainable.
Exactly.
You can be sustainable that you're covering salary and growing at a nice, decent pace, or
because everything else is a transition.
Well, isn't that what we all want? I mean, really and truly, career, love life, whatever that might be, relationships with your family, you want there to be an equilibrium that's good and happy and positive and growth. But then you want that extra, which is the discovery.
Well, so
like the spice of life.
Yeah.
But you can only transition certain parts of your life at once.
Sure.
You don't want to be looking for trying to get married while you're also going to school, while you're also
looking for a job.
While you're that's terrible.
I feel like I should announce a couple things. I just bought my first brand new car today. I've never done that before. That's a big deal.
That's awesome. Congrats.
And last night, my boyfriend asked my family for my hand in marriage.
Wow.
Way to bury the lead now.
I know. So I'm in transition and a sprint and celebrating, and my life feels great, and I'm doing so much.
So I'm just going to give you one tip.
You should take the whole thing.
Maybe wait 6 months to plan the marriage.
I'm working on it. The sister's already like, okay, so we're going to go
until the show finishes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, at least finish
exactly.
the show.
Exactly. So in a couple weeks, I might have a rock to show y'all.
Fantastic.
Nice.
That's great news. Congrats.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
But that's a transition. You're right.
Exactly.
Let's try to get one more question in before the hour's up. This has been
I'll make it fast.
This is, but we got to listen to the whole clip.
I guess so. You're right. Okay, that's true. All right. It's not my forte, but okay.
All right, let's see.
Are you worried about the future at all?
I don't know. I think AI could possibly get out of control, but I mean, for me, it helps me. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's been very beneficial in my educational career, but I mean, as far as I know, like, people are saying that there might be robots that are going to start walking around and stuff, you know what I mean? So I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, in that sense, I'm not too sure, but I mean, educationally, I mean, I think it's an amazing tool, you know?
Yeah.
So, more of a thought.
Yeah.
There is this just general consensus: is AI good or bad, and how does it affect my job or what I'm doing? Am I wasting my time going to school, or is it a good tool to have?
AI, as we know it now, is in its infancy. We are just starting to scratch the surface on what could be possible in the future. We have no idea what it's going to turn into. It could be, it could take us to the moon. It could be the next Segway. We don't know. We think it's pretty big. The way I look at AI right now, and I'm a big believer, I think it's great. I had a lot of friends that are in the business and doing startups and all that, and everybody's making lots of money and deploying a lot of capital. But at the end of the day, right now, today, AI is nothing more than superpowered autocorrect. It's just autocorrect. It's basically Grammarly, but for other things. And I say that pejoratively, and I say that sort of tongue in cheek, but AI is only capable of putting something together that's already been done before.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It still synthesizes lots of different things, and it does it in an amazing way. We've all played with ChatGPT and Claude and all these different great things. Like, they're fun, but at this moment, they're toys. Next year, we're going to have agents that really do follow us around, that will know who our preferences, it will keep us up to date, it will track our preferences, it will do those kinds of things. General purpose AI is not going to happen for a very long time, but some of the more interesting agents, for instance, at some point, not this year, but not your next marriage, it's only one marriage for you. Years from now, marriages will be planned. You won't have a wedding planner. You'll have an AI to do it.
Yeah, you will.
Right.
Or you'll have a wedding planner who uses AI.
Right.
Well, you'll choose the images you like off Instagram or whatever, and
It's just a perfect example.
And they're like, here you go. Here's the venue you're going to need. Here's the decor you're going to do. Here's
But
the
that's
thing
just
of it.
the venue. You just bought a car. How long did it take you to buy the car? How long did you search for the car?
Not very long. Not very long.
Because you had all the images and everything was standard.
Right. I was like, what's the right answer?
Oh, no, there's no right answer.
Yeah, it didn't take me long at all.
Because now here we are with tools and systems and lots of businesses and everything else that you can find a car. I actually recently did the same thing. It was a used car, but same kind of deal.
Yeah.
We have standardized this. You can't standardize a wedding.
Right.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
You can't.
It all
But
has
that's
to be
exactly
very
what I
bespoke.
don't want. I don't want the not wedding. I want something where somebody shows up and they're like, I've never done that before. That was really cool.
All right,
Every
we're
bride
doing
wants
elephant wedding.
Okay, great. I don't know what that is. I'm there.
Well, I just want to make sure we answer this question the time we have left. So future's bright. It's a very windy path. We don't know what it's going to look like. I like to tell people, especially Gen Z, learn to love learning. Learning the actual, you're a professor, you know this. Things change. People learn more, rules change, theories change. Scientific method the idea is to make sure that we're telling the theoretical truth. But if you don't know how to learn, if you don't know how to absorb information or really how to search for information, I really do think Googling, which by the way, we're not going to Google much anymore. We're going to AI chat a lot.
I don't Google it very much anymore.
I kind of like a blend. It depends what I'm looking for.
But that's
you're looking for an ad?
Well, if I want a science paper, I'm not going to ask.
Right.
Not yet.
Store.
I mean, maybe one day, but like
you're not going to ask what?
Googling.
Because because ChatGPT's got the agents that go down the scientific papers.
My point is, these are all technologies and tools and systems. They're all going to change and enhance over time. Understanding how to use them, knowing how to swing a hammer. Even if you have a great hammer, you have to know how to do it.
Right.
And so I think it's really important to have digital literacy in the business world. And that's what a lot of these high school and college kids should be taught.
See, I like that hammer analogy, and I've used this a lot with tools, right? Technology is just a tool.
Sure.
That's all it really is. And AI is just an ever more complicated hammer. A hammer can be used to build or to destroy. AI is not good or bad. People can be good or bad. And what people do with the tool will define how we feel about AI. But at the end of the day, it's us. Don't blame the AI. Don't blame the internet. Don't blame computers. Don't make certain things bad. Bad people do that, right? And if we as a society decide to create institutions and organizations that further worsen our society, that's on us. Don't blame the AI. I mean, that was enabling, but somebody there did that very purposefully, perhaps very quietly, perhaps they're hard to see. That's often the way with politics. But someone did that. The AI isn't evil. It's just math.
That's right.
You know what I think is fun, going off of the whole tool thing? Yes, it is a fact that a person with a chainsaw cuts more trees than a person with an axe.
That is true.
And that's all we have here. But also the person making that decision on which trees to cut and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm proud that this generation, Gen Z, is the one that's going to be the main wielder of AI. Because as we've talked before, they have a lot more care about the earth. They just have this
integrity.
They just have a lot more emotional connection to a lot of the things because they've seen where things can go. So my hope in this good past bad, and of course there's good and bad people everywhere. But if as a generation your attitude is to be greener, be, take care of others, love, mental health, all of that kind of stuff. And you're the generation that's going to be wielding this going future. I just think we've got some pretty good hope going forward.
Yeah. And with that,
I'll let you finish it out because I was like, that's a good ending, but I shouldn't end it. Go ahead, end it.
I felt that, so I took it. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on the show, Marc Nathan.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
What an incredible conversation today with Marc Nathan. From his journey of becoming a super connector to his insights on mentorship and the future of AI, there's so much to take away. Whether you're just starting out or deep into your career, Marc's advice on building relationships, navigating transitions, and staying adaptable is invaluable. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs a little inspiration today. If you would like to participate as a Gen Z guest or mentor, visit our site at foundingup.com or check out the show notes. And as always, keep pushing forward, stay curious, and don't be afraid to explore the uncharted.